Drugs can kill. We all know that. Greed and incompetence can kill too. Put those together, and you have the defendant today, Dr. Ray Schaefer. May it please the court, Your Honor, opposing counsel, and ladies and gentlemen of the jury. A major problem facing our society today is the abuse of opioids. In the past year alone, this resulted in over 60,000 deaths. Many communities have been affected by this epidemic because of doctors who abuse their power to prescribe, resulting in their patients becoming addicted. These addictions lead to tragedies, such as overdoses, and in this case, death. What you're about to hear is the tragic death of local legend Hadley McAdoo, also known as Coach, at the hands of the defendant, Dr. Ray Schaefer. We are here today to represent the lost voice of Hadley McAdoo, and you, ladies and gentlemen, are here to see that justice is done. The Commonwealth charges Dr. Ray Schaefer with the felony of drug delivery resulting in death. A person is guilty of this crime if he or she administers or prescribes drugs other than in good faith. The defendant did not act in good faith when administering hydromorphone and prescribing oxycodone on December 16, 2016 in the treatment of Hadley McAdoo. So, what is good faith? Good faith is defined as faithfulness to one's duty or obligation and observance of reasonable standards within a profession. Dr. Schaefer did not act in good faith. The facts will show this. Now let's see how we know that. You will learn that in the beginning, the doctor's practice did not prescribe opioids until it was the last resort. They strived to do this. Yet, after the clinic went bankrupt, the defendant reopened the practice as an opioid-driven business, handing out prescriptions like candy. The prescription rates rose from 13% to 80%, nearly double the national average, and the defendant raked in the cash. This new practice drove hundreds of new patients, including Hadley McAdoo. Coach McAdoo was immediately given a script for opioids and had it refilled multiple times without the defendant once checking the PDMP, a statewide database that would have told her the other medications Hadley McAdoo was taking. Additionally, no urine screenings were done, which would have also told her the other medications that Hadley McAdoo was taking. These are two guidelines from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention that establish the standard of care and were simply ignored by Dr. Schaefer. The Commonwealth will call 3 witnesses today. You will first hear from Mr. Fran Kelsey, a nurse practitioner who worked for Dr. Schaefer. He will testify that to the CDC guidelines that were ignored in the treatment of Hadley McAdoo. You would next hear from J.J. Tabo. Mr. Tabo was a friend of Hadley McAdoo. He will testify to the coach's actions, to the doctor's actions and mindset in regards to Coach. Finally, you will hear from Royal Copeland, a drug investigator from the DEA, or the Department for Education, Investigation of Drugs. Sorry. He will testify to the abnormally high prescription rates of the defendant and how these were being prescribed for improper purposes. The burden of proof in today's case is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. This does not mean, however, proof beyond all possible doubt or to a mathematical certainty. The Commonwealth will prove today, beyond a reasonable doubt, that the defendant did not act in good faith because the defendant failed to even attempt to comply with the standard of care. Ladies and gentlemen, would you expect your doctor, who is about to prescribe you dangerous drugs, to comply with the standards of care before injecting you with a potentially deadly dosage? The facts will show that Dr. Schaefer injected Hadley McAdoo with what became a lethal dosage of hydromorphone without obtaining the essential information about her medications. The defendant's actions were greed-driven, completely unprofessional, and dangerous. The standards of care are in place for a reason. If Dr. Schaefer had complied, Coach would be alive. At the end of the trial, my co-counsel Ava Smith will ask you to return with the only verdict consistent with the facts. Guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Defense, Ms. McCoy.
Permission to proceed?
Please proceed.
Drugs, greed, and incompetence kill. Today, you have seen that the defendant, Dr. Ray Schaefer, motivated by greed, incompetently used opioid drugs and killed Coach McAdoo. May it please the court, Your Honor, opposing counsel, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. We care about good faith, not the legality of each thing brought up today in court. When you become a doctor, you take an oath to do no harm. Doctors have an obligation to constantly act in good faith, no matter what the situation is, because at the end of the day, it's their patient, their medicine, and their responsibility. Now, Dr. Schaefer's practice began in good faith, but it quickly took a turn for the worse when her financial situation changed. The minute things started going south in the defendant's business life, she started practicing medicine in bad faith by acting more like a drug dealer than a doctor. Instead of maybe 8 or 13% of patients getting opioid prescriptions, which is what she was doing before financial problems occurred, the defendant's rates drastically increased to 84%. Think about that, ladies and gentlemen. 84%. This at a time when national rates were dropping to half that number. With that as a backdrop, the ultimate question to you, ladies and gentlemen, is did Dr. Ray Schaefer act in good faith when treating Coach McAdoo? Under the law, good faith means being faithful to your duty and obligations as defined by professional standards. Here, those standards are set by the CDC, and its guidelines define how and when a doctor should prescribe opioids. 2 of those guidelines mandate that a physician conduct urine tests and check the PDMP before prescribing opioids. And why is that? Because a 3rd guideline states that opioids and benzodiazepines should never be prescribed concurrently. Yet that is exactly what Dr. Schaefer did and had been doing for months. And why did she do that, you may ask? Because she never once did a urine test on Coach and never once checked the PDMP. Had she bothered to do either, she would have learned that other doctors have been prescribing Xanax and oxycodone to Coach for months. But not just other doctors, ladies and gentlemen, but Dr. Ray Schaefer herself. The defendant prescribed oxycodone on 3 separate occasions over the last 3 months, which means she had 3 opportunities to check the PDMP, in October, in November, and in December. If the defendant would have checked even one of these 3 times, she would have seen that Coach was taking Xanax, a benzodiazepine. With that knowledge, she should have never prescribed those opioids. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Schaefer did not simply act negligently. She acted in willful disregard of her duty, and her bad faith was directly responsible for Coach McAdoo's death. The defendant wants to blame everyone else, but particularly the victim and Nurse Kelsey. The problem is that while the defendant can try and run from her duty, she can't hide from it. The defendant should have known Coach was an addict, and because her symptoms showed signs of possible withdrawal, she should have checked the database, but she didn't. As for Nurse Kelsey, it was Dr. Schaefer who had the power to prescribe potentially lethal drugs, and it was Dr. Schaefer who had the duty to follow those guidelines before prescribing those dangerous drugs. Dr. Schaefer, with the power to heal and to kill, prescribed a deadly dosage of opioids. But if the doctor complied, Coach would be alive. Ladies and gentlemen, the facts demonstrate beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant prescribed drugs resulting in death, and that she did so out of greed and in willful disregard of professional standards. Your verdict matters. Your verdict will hold accountable a rogue doctor who valued money over the health and lives of her patients. For that reason, we ask that you return with the only verdict consistent with the evidence, that Dr. Ray Schaefer is guilty as charged. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. How about a round of